This happened about 5 years ago, back when I was going through hard times and was homeless. I used to live in Denver, Colorado, which is where this took place. There are several cemeteries in the Denver area, but there's one on the outskirts that's very large and very old. I think it may be one of the oldest ones that's still being actively used. Before I became homeless, I didn't know much about this area. I had always gotten a creepy feeling around there, but didn't know why until I was on the streets. After that, I heard from many different people that it's got lots of underground tunnels and some homeless people live in them. But in the deeper tunnels, there is cult activity. Those tunnels have secret entrances all over the area, and the homeless that live around there avoid some of these spider holes because people have been known to disappear near them, mostly women. The area has a river going through it alongside the graveyard. One side of the river has a darker field than the other. It's eerie over there and smells like death. One time I was wandering in the area with a few other acquaintances. You know, safety and numbers and all that. We had nowhere to go and decided to hang out in the abandoned part of the graveyard, the older side. It had just gotten dark and it was windy out. It was also fall, so it was cold. We were huddled up against gravestones to block the wind, and one of the people I was with knew the area better than me, and he had warned me to be very vigilant. I figured this was so we didn't attract the attention of security or police or fellow homeless. But I later found out why he was so anxious about the area. It was probably around 10 p.m. and we had all sort of been just sitting in silence, trying to stay warm, hoping the night passed quickly, when I heard my acquaintance, I'll call him Jay, whisper, "Hey, heads up, keep quiet." I had already been being quiet, but I immediately tensed up, assuming he spotted security or something. But as I looked around, I saw in the distance some small flickering lights appearing here and there all around the graveyard. It's like people had been spread all around the large graveyard, and they were all holding lighters that they flicked on, which only then showed that they were all over. After my eyes adjusted a bit, I recognized that they seemed to be candles. I looked harder and could sort of see the outlines of people holding these candles. Jay whispered, "We gotta go." We clumsily started grabbing the few items we had around us. Jay came right up next to me and said, "Follow me and don't look at them." I was thinking, what the fuck? Me and our other friend quickly started following Jay, moving at a quick walk straight to the break in the fence where we had come in. I was stupid enough to look behind me and saw the lights and figures continuing to appear all around us, and they were walking to the middle of the graveyard to stand in a circle. I passed by a few and saw out of the corner of my eye that they were wearing black cloaks. I could feel the menacing presence and stares, like they were daring me to look at them. But I had an overwhelming feeling that if we left them alone, they would leave us alone. One thing that haunted me afterward was the way that they seemed to move towards the middle. They moved quickly and smoothly, like they were gliding. I know it's a stereotype, but they just seemed to morph out of the darkness. My instincts were on high alert. I knew whoever they were pure evil. We got the hell out of there, and once we got to the fence, we full-on sprinted for a few blocks. Jay didn't explain much. He just said to avoid those people. Don't look them in the eye, or they could have power over you. I had definitely gotten that feeling from our encounter. I asked why they weren't afraid of cops or security, and he said basically that they got away with stuff they did because the authorities didn't want to risk looking into it because they didn't want to be targeted. I don't know how true that is, but I do know what I saw and felt. This happened to me while I was in middle school. For background, we used to live in a really crappy and old house in a really crappy and old neighborhood. Our house had two types of fences. In the very back of our yard was a tall wooden fence, and in the front and sides of the house was a generic white picket fence. The first year that we lived there, it was really quiet. We never saw many neighbors around and rarely heard anything. This changed, however, when I began to hear knocking at my window. This happened for a couple of weeks, and every time I had told my parents, they didn't believe me. I'm very spiritual, and then I used to think our house was haunted. It creaked a lot and always had weird noises, which I counted as evidence. The knocking continued to get worse over the weeks. I remember thinking that the knocking was coming from the mirror in my room because it was so loud it sounded like it was coming from my room. I had two windows in my room, one above my nightstand and one that was right beside my bed. I want to specify that this knocking only came from the one above my nightstand. The window beside my bed had a giant metal box underneath it. It had loud fans on it. I don't know the name of it. The other window had bushes below it. The knocking grew. At that point, I confided in my younger sister about things. Since my parents didn't believe me, I found out that my sister had also heard loud knocking from her own windows. I did tell my parents that we both heard them, and my dad said that he had investigated things but didn't find anything. There was one night I remember very vividly. I had managed to make a pillow fort in my room with chairs and sheets and had been sleeping in it that night. It was late summer and I couldn't fall asleep, so I watched the Dawn Twins on YouTube. I had eventually put my phone away on my nightstand, rolled over, and then tried to fall asleep. That's when the soft tapping on my window started. I was used to it by that point, but I was still terrified. I just laid still and waited for it to go, but it didn't. The tapping turned into loud knocks, then soon into pounding at my window. I refused to move at that point, crying. I thought the glass was going to shatter from how hard the pounding on my window had been. I had heard my window shaking as it proceeded, and just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. But it only led to weirder things happening. I remember looking at the bushes that were shifted weirdly under my window, and I guess that's when it really hit me that a person had been doing this, not some ghost. And other weird things that had happened at the house included one night when my family had gotten home pretty late, and I remembered, like straight out of a horror movie, in the large bushes under my sister's window, I heard a phone go off. It was pitch black outside, so I didn't see anybody, but I swear on everything to this day I did hear a phone ping. That happened twice to me. I heard a phone ping under my window a couple of nights later. From that time I was in bed, random rocks and marbles would show up outside. I never really thought anything of it, but I did find it weird. Outside, in front of our garage, we used to find large rocks, the kind that you would find at a playground. Our house didn't have any of these things, and along with those, we would find small marbles lying around. The reason I point to my neighbor for this is because he was the only neighbor we would ever see. I mean, it was rare, actually, to see him, but usually he was just in his yard. If I ever saw him, or he caught me looking at him, he would move out of sight behind our large wooden fence. It was one specific day when he had really scared me and my sister. My dad had left the house for something, and my sister, me and my mom, were the only people home. Me and my sister, I'll call her A, were sitting on the back porch swing, and we did this regularly, almost sitting and talking. As the sun began to set, we faced toward our white fences, and at that moment I had been looking around the yard. That's when I saw him, our neighbor at our fence, peering over, watching me, and I tried ignoring him until he started walking along our white fence. He paced back and forth beside it, watching us, not speaking. He did that for a couple of minutes before our mother noticed, and I guessed through the window. She made us come inside, and she stayed at our glass back door to watch them, and he kept pacing. After a while of him doing this and him not speaking, leaving and showing no signs of stopping, my mother called our grandfather to come over and told my dad to come back. Once my grandfather did show up, the neighbor left and went back into his house. After that, we didn't hear much from him. We did hear occasional knocks and did find rocks, but other than that, he stayed quiet. My fear about a stalker was confirmed after we moved. The family that moved in after us had 2 sons. I believe they were the same age as me and A. The new residents reported that once their oldest son had accidentally thrown something away and had to go find it in the garbage outside. Next morning, they got a letter on their front porch, not in their mailbox if I remember correctly. The letter read something along the lines of, "I saw your son last night digging through the trash. You should tell him to be more careful. You don't know who is watching." That family moved shortly afterward. I told my parents about it, and apparently the family had been experiencing similar things like me and A did when we lived there. As far as I'm aware, nobody lives at that house now, nor was the person who left the notes, knocked, or whatever was found or caught. About a month ago, 5 of my friends and I, 3 males and 3 females in our group, went up to my cabin. We arrived late Wednesday night to stay Thursday, Friday, and leave on Saturday. For context, my cabin is about an hour and 40 out of the city, off a random highway, down the end of a dirt road, and down a steep hill. I'm saying this because I want you to know it's not the easiest place to find or stumble across unless you knew about it. We have neighbors and whatnot nearby, which we all knew pretty well and have never had issues with. Now that that's out of the way, I'll get to Friday night. Jade and Soup, a male and a female, left the cabin to go back to the city. I made dinner for the rest of us, and we were all hanging out inside for a bit, drinking and whatnot. At one point, one of my friends rose up, knocked on the glass patio door, and my friend Joey jokingly knocked back. Bobby, who was pretty superstitious, started to kind of freak out and said, "Y'all don't do that. It attracts stuff. It's almost 2 a.m. Some time passed, and my friend Rose mentioned that we still hadn't had a fire or used the s'mores stuff we bought while shopping for the trip. After a couple of shots and a smoke, we all bug sprayed up and grabbed our needed materials and headed out through the patio. When you go out to the patio, you step onto a raised deck. It's about 10 feet off the ground and wraps around 3/4 of the cabin, getting closer to the ground as you go out our front door. About halfway, there's stairs that lead to our lawn and a small beach. As it is on a lake, we've got a fire pit and a shed and shooting area behind that. Lastly, and most importantly, off to the side, passing the fire pit, is a somewhat grown-in path that attaches to a bigger path that belongs to a private beach association. As we went outside and headed down the stairs, me leading everyone with my phone's flashlight at 10%, of course, I just started to get a bad feeling, which I brushed off and told myself it's fine. It's because it's 2 a.m. and you're scared because it's dark. As we got down to the fire, Emmy and Bobby started to collect wood sticks and sawdust from the ground nearby. It was kind of windy and waves were crashing on the shore. But as I was gathering wood, I swore I heard a twig snap or something in the bushes. I ignored it. I moved on. I was bent down, passing wood to place into the fire when I thought I heard someone cough or like clear their throat. I felt like I was being watched. The sounds were coming from the same spot in the woods. I ignored it and moved on. Except when I looked, I noticed Bobby was looking too, which meant Bobby heard it. Bobby was collecting sticks and went, "Oh God, I gotta wash my hands." When we all asked why, he showed us a snapped animal bone on the ground, pointing right in the direction of the path. The path we walked all day and didn't see any bones. By then, the fire was going and Rose was making her s'mores. I was freaked out by now, and I knew Bobby was freaked out too. I pulled out my notes app and said, "Did you hear someone?" And then I walked over to Bobby, discreetly showing him the phone. "Yes," he typed back. At that point, both of our eyes kept being drawn to the path to the beach, and eventually we heard noises all around us. I heard something run across the beach and into a bush. We heard kids laughing between the waves and the wind blow, and we heard something in the bushes by the shed and shooting area. But all the while, our eyes kept being drawn to the path to the private beach. I opened up my notes app again and wrote, "We need to go," and showed it to Bobby, not wanting whatever was out there to know what I was saying. Bobby was crouched down watching the path, holding a huge stick like a bat, ready to swing it. I had a marshmallow roaster in between my hands like it was a shiv, and fucking Rose was over there asking us what kind of s'mores she should make next. She eventually made another, and we started to kind of hint to the group that we should go inside. At one point, Bobby stood up and went closer to the path, and he asked me for my phone, which was now at 5%. He shined it at the woods in the path, and suddenly he handed me the phone back and looked at us and said, "Go upstairs right now." Rose grabbed her things but couldn't find her lighter, which Bobby yelled, "Fuck your lighter, go!" We kicked the fire out and headed back up to the cabin as quickly as we could. We locked ourselves inside and barricaded the doors, and sat down and asked Bobby what he saw. I looked at the path with your flashlight and I saw someone's shoulder, neck, and the bottom of their chin. They were crouched down in the bushes. Whoever it was skinny and pale. Our blood ran cold, and we sat in the kitchen for 2 hours, each holding a knife. We each went to bed with a knife too. About 20 minutes after me, Bobby and Joey fell asleep. We heard something banging around outside. When the morning came, we went to investigate, but there was nothing to be found. I don't know who or what was in those woods watching us, but even if it was a human, which I don't think it was, no normal person would be watching a group of people from the woods at 2 or almost 3 a.m. So to whoever or whatever was in those bushes, let's not meet again. I want to preface this all by saying I grew up seeing ghosts, so the whole topic of spirits wasn't new to me. However, I was so scared by them that around the time I was 7 or 8, when the energetic system starts to be solely individualized, I trained my brain to not see them anymore. I never talked about it with friends, as my family never believed me, so I assumed they wouldn't either. Story goes back to the aughts. I was a little girl celebrating my friend's birthday, and she always had a Halloween party to celebrate because that's when her birthday happened to be. She always talked about how her basement felt weird and she didn't like staying down there alone. Well, having 10 or so 10-year-old girls sleep over on Halloween night isn't exactly bedroom material, so her mom and grandma set us up in the basement, and there we played those weird games like light as a feather, stiff as a board, and stuff like that. And fun fact, I was the only one we successfully levitated. I remember opening my eyes and I was damn near the ceiling. It was spooky. But when some of us started to get tired, we brought out the Ouija board. A few of our friends were spooked, so they didn't want to participate. We asked innocent questions like kids usually do. Who is the birthday girl going to marry? How old are we going to be when we have kids? Stuff like that. I remember I asked a question about myself, and it replied, dead, which was weird. Some of the other girls got spooked even more by that. Then a girl screamed and said she saw something behind me in the mirror, and we stopped after that for a few hours. 3 of us, including me and the birthday girl, couldn't sleep. We weren't sure if the board was real or not, so we decided we'd try one more time while everyone else was asleep, thinking that since they didn't want to play, it'd be better that way. We were close to 3 a.m. What we heard was the witching hour. Remember here that we were about 10 or 11 years old, dumb, and had no idea what we were doing or who we were talking to. We asked the board if it could do something for us. We said at 3:15 a.m. to have the girl who saw something behind me in the mirror wake up and say something to us. This was over 15 years ago, so I don't remember what we asked the girl to say, and all I know is we asked her to look into the mirror and say it. 3:15 a.m. was about 20 or so minutes from when we asked the question, and I remember saying goodbye to the board and putting it away. The 3 of us were talking about how impossible our ask was when 3:15 a.m. hit. We knew it at 3:15 a.m. because her basement had a big grandfather clock that didn't ring anymore, but the clock function still worked. We were waiting, and right before the time changed to 3:16 a.m. it happened. The girl shot straight up out of her blankets and looked straight at the mirror with her eyes closed. She whispered what we had asked her to say, then dropped to her pillow like nothing ever happened. We all just looked at each other, frozen. No other girl that was sleeping even stirred. None of them moved, not 1 centimeter. We were so freaked out that we didn't sleep until the sun came up, and in October in the Midwest, that's pretty late. We got 3 hours of sleep tops that night, and that was my first ever Ouija board experience. And that changed the way I viewed spirits forever. I still think about it and feel guilty that I basically asked for one of my friends to be possessed. As a teen, my parents would send my sister and I up to New York for summer break. We'd go camping, 4-wheeling, off-roading while hopping around from home to home, living among our relatives and friends. It was the best memories. There was one night, though, that terrified me and always stays in my mind. I was out with a friend late at night, cruising in her car, windows down, listening to some music, and having the best time. A sequence of events led up to where we were being chased in our car. I'm not going to elaborate on that part. But in an effort to hide, we went into a deeply wooded long road that was some kind of country park or wildlife preserve. I'm not sure exactly because it wasn't a place we planned to go or knew about. It just looked like a dark place where we could hide for a bit. As we were speeding through the woods, It was so dark, not really any streetlights or signs, and we swerved into a mini park opening type area, unpaved dirt road, and our headlights revealed in the dark and a clearing in the woods, a gathering of about 8 to 10 people standing in a large circle, dressed in long white robes and white hoods. They were chanting in a low tone, and as our headlights exposed them, they immediately turned to look in our direction. The hoods were all white, covering their whole face with just 2 holes for eyes. For a few seconds we stared at them, and they stared back at us. Suddenly one of them started sprinting towards us. In our car, my friend started cursing, I was screaming, and she slammed on the gas and reversed out of there. We got out and made it home eventually. It was well after midnight, and I just remember us sitting quietly in the car, still in shock. We had no idea what we had just seen, but we never talked about it again after that night. This was before the smartphone era, and it was before the Google everything mentality, so it never came to my mind to research it until today. I Googled the area we were in. I got an instant match. Whiskey Hollow Road, New York. It's a 5-mile road cutting through the woods that is now closed at night because the satanic cults frequently have meetings and ritual sacrifices out there at night. It's also rumored that people have been murdered there, including children, and apparently it's very haunted. If you're interested, just Google it. The stories are horrible. I mean, this is crazy. I'm like 99% sure this is where we were, unless there is another similar place that someone from central New York can offer up. Has anyone heard of this place before? Anyone been there at night or seen one of those meetings? Friendship turned sour. The story of Sherry, whom names have been changed for privacy reasons. This all happened this year in 2024. When I first met Sherry, she seemed like a nice friend. We got along well, and she became part of our friend group, and everything seemed fine. And when she started dating my friend Jack, it felt like she was becoming an even closer part of our circle. For a while, things were good between them. But then, out of nowhere, she broke up with Jack over Messenger. It was sudden and unexpected, leaving us all surprised. After the breakup, things took a darker turn. Sherry left me a voicemail, the first of what would become a series of threatening messages. In the voicemail, she did something unforgivable. She used a racist slur, a word that no one should ever say, let alone direct at someone else. One of my friends, who was African American, was particularly hurt and angry when he found out. That one word shattered whatever was left of the friendship we had with Sherry. A few days later, she sent me another voicemail. This time, she was apologizing to me at least. But even as she apologized, she made it clear that she had no intention of apologizing to Jack. I knew right away that her apology was fake, just a way to manipulate the situation and maybe get me to side with her. It didn't work, but that wasn't the end. Months later, Sherry would do the same thing again, this time directing her racist and threatening behavior at another friend of ours who was African American. It was beyond uncool. It was deeply hurtful and dangerous. Her actions made it clear that she was no longer the person we thought she was. Then came the day of the hit list. I received a message from a random phone number that contained a list of names with mine at the very top. The message read, my name is Sherry, followed by the list of people she was targeting. As I said, my name was the first. She continued to send threatening messages, one of which said, "Bitch, shut the fuck up. If you don't like me, get my name out of your fucking mouth." I responded calmly, stating that I could call the police if needed. But the threats kept coming. Something in my brain told me that I needed to take action. I knew I couldn't just let these threats go unanswered, so I called 911. The police came to my house and I gave them my statement. They took the situation seriously, documenting everything. Having the police involved made me feel a little safer, but the fear still lingered. Sherry even went as far as to say, "I know where you live, bitch." This was no longer just an angry rant. It felt like a serious threat to my safety and the safety of my friends. We had no choice but to consider taking legal action. Sherry had crossed a line, and her behavior was spiraling out of control. Throughout all this, Sherry tried to make me look like the bad guy. She texted my mom on Facebook, trying to twist the story and make herself look like the victim and paint me as the problem. It didn't stop there. At one point, I called her out on her bullshit in another messenger group chat. I wanted to make it clear to our friends that Sherry was not someone we should trust, but the person who created the group chat didn't know what Sherry had been doing to the rest of us. I was mad at him for unknowingly giving her a platform, but later I forgave him through a text, understanding that he didn't know the full story. Sherry moved into a group home that was close to where my girlfriend, Robert and Jack, live. She's about a half hour away from me, but her proximity to my friends adds to the stress and concern we're all feeling. It doesn't help that my friend Victor is obsessed with Sherry. Despite everything she's done, he seems fixated on her, which only complicates the situation further. Even though she's in a group home where she's close to my girlfriend and my friend Robert, but a little ways away from me, it still scares me that she could get a job one day, collect enough money, and potentially come and find us to harm us, mostly me. Because again, I'm on the top of her hit list. As someone like me who's half blind, I don't think my pocket knife will defend me forever. I mean, thankfully I haven't had to use it on anybody, but I am worried. Thankfully, for now I can enjoy my music and my audiobooks to calm me down, especially next week with my upcoming break. Until the new class starts, I might not be so lucky with the new teachers. It depends on if they'll be nice enough to hear my story and maybe let me listen to music while I do my work in class. It just goes to show you guys, if you feel like there's a friend who doesn't seem right, cut them out of your life. It's best to protect yourself before things escalate like they did for me. Okay, I don't know if everyone will necessarily find this scary. For me personally, it absolutely makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So in England, there's a festival every year called Glastonbury. It takes place in Somerset and is the biggest festival in England. It's 5 days and mostly a music festival, but it also has dance, theaters, circus, performances, comedy. Around the late 80s, early 90s, my dad worked security there with a few friends. Mostly his job was to drive around the perimeter of the festival with one of his friends in a truck to catch anyone trying to sneak in. On the second day, my dad and his mate were driving around and heard some people on the other side of the wall clearly trying to sneak in. Usually people threw their bags over first, so my dad and his partner parked the truck by the side of the wall and got out. A few seconds later, these bags came thumping down on the roof of the truck, followed by 2 people. They were halfway over the wall when they saw my dad and his friends standing in their security uniforms, glaring at them and just basically looking very intimidating. They froze, clearly not sure what to do. After a few moments of silence, my dad and his mate broke out into big smiles. They told the people to jump over and they'd drive them down to the main part of the festival. This was not a ploy. My dad and his friend just didn't care that much. If the people didn't look like they were going to cause trouble, they'd let them through. While driving the group down to the main part of the festival, my dad and his friend got a call on the radio. It was from another member of the security team that they knew, asking them to go check out the toilets because something was going on. They dropped the group off and radioed back to find out what was happening. The guy told them that someone had reported being bitten on the ass in the toilet. Obviously confused, my dad and his mate asked if the guy was joking. He said no, but the person who reported it was clearly high, so it was probably nothing, but they should just check it out in case. Now, these are festival toilets. Slightly flimsy, temporary setup over what is basically a cesspit. They weren't too sure what they were looking for. They went down to the toilets, had a look around, and left. They continued their patrol around the border and overheard 3 more calls on the radio saying someone had reported being bitten on the ass. Other members of security closer to the toilets checked it out and found nothing. The assumption was it was just some sort of joke or a rumor had started and people were so high they were imagining it. My dad and his mate were known by the rest of the security for being very strong and good fighters, and they were usually the ones that got called if anything got out of hand. Then a call came through the radio directed at my dad and his mate. A 4th person had reported being bitten on the ass while on the toilet. Only this time the woman had a large bite mark that had broken the skin. She had shown it to one of the medics, who said it definitely appeared to be a human bite mark. Everyone was still very confused as to what was actually happening. My dad and his friends raced down to the toilets, and they got into a cubicle and shone a light down into the toilet. Not exactly a pleasant job. Again, not really sure what they were looking for. They moved the light around a little bit, and right before they were about to switch the torch off, they saw something move, like an unusual movement. My dad's friend, not knowing what else to do, called out, "Is there someone down there?" They saw a faster movement that time. The guy called out again, "We're not going to hurt you, we just need to know if there's someone down there." Nothing. Then all of a sudden, a head popped out of the toilet. It was a man wearing a snorkel and swim goggles. Absolutely stunned, my dad asked how he had gotten down there. The guy said he'd tunneled in. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure they took part of the toilet apart so he could get out, covered head to toe in feces. This guy was escorted out by my dad and his friend. No one really knew what to make of it. My dad and his friend watched over him while they called the police, and during that time, the guy spoke to my dad. The guy said he had gotten there over a week or two early and dug a tunnel from the edge of the neighboring field, bearing in mind these toilets were right on the edge of the festival grounds. He had done this with the full intention of just sitting below the toilets and biting people when they sat down. He also said this was the first time he had been caught, insinuating that he had done it before. According to my dad and his friend, the man was incredibly friendly and polite, but in their words, was completely dead behind the eyes. Like even if he was looking straight at you, it was like you weren't there. On more than one occasion, the man licked his lips, which were covered in feces. The guy wouldn't answer questions about his name or anything like that, and would just answer by waffling about the festival. According to my dad's friend, at one point, while the man was saying how good the festival was, he swore he heard him say under his breath, "A shame they don't let children in." The police took their good old time getting there, and I can't say I blame them. I don't know what happened to the guy after that. I remember feeling sick when my dad first told me this, and it's safe to say I am now petrified of using portable or outdoor toilets.